Coming up on today's edition of Locked On Eagles, we're going to get into the young leaders that are leading this Eagles team into the future, plus more 21 personnel this year, over 12, two running backs, over two receivers. And I'm also going to get into another defensive starter that I think is being slept on in the 2022 season. That's coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Welcome in, Eagles fans, to a Thursday edition of the show. Episode 4 this week of 5, downloaded into your phone wherever you get the podcast, free and available on all platforms, in video form as well on YouTube. And make sure you hit us up on Twitter. Always Talking Birds each and every day, after the show, before the show, right before I go to bed, right when I wake up. Eat, sleep, and breathe Birds, at Locked On Birds, at DiBiase LOE. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. It's not a crisis line. It's not self-help. It's professional therapy done securely online, available to people worldwide. And they have a special offer for my listeners. Get 10% off your first month at BetterHelp.com/LockedOn. The Eagles had another practice today, and overall, kind of the same mixed bag with the offensive side of the football. The defense sounds like it's absolutely dominating. It looks like it could be a top 10 unit in 2022. Gino and I talked about that the other day, that this could be the most complete unit the Eagles have had on that side of the ball, top to bottom, where there's very little holes. And I don't even know. I mean, the Super Bowl defense, I guess, in 2017, 2018, how good that pass rush was down the stretch. But the secondary wasn't amazing, especially at cornerback with Jalen Mills and Ronald Darby. The defense continues to dominate. Some good things still from the offensive side of the ball, too. A.J. Brown shining. Jalen Hurts was, steady today as well. But I think it was the little things that I paid attention to more when following practice today. And that's what I wanted to lead the show off with. I think the Eagles have benefited so much from leadership the last 5 years. I think leadership has gotten the Eagles, and I think it's an obvious, cliche that leadership can take you a long ways in sports. You have to be a team. You have to be united, especially football. It's a team sport, right? We've all heard that before, but I think it really is true. And I think the Eagles have seen the benefit of that unity inside the locker room, veteran leadership over the last 5 years, right? I think a huge reason the Eagles have been able to win a Super Bowl and make the playoffs in 4 of the last 5 seasons has been because of leadership. To be able to overcome the catastrophic amount of injuries that they have suffered over the last 5 years, the incredibly slow starts to seasons, the anonymous sources trash talking other teammates. Most teams that deal with that kind of turmoil, that kind of adversity, especially in Philadelphia, in an unforgiving market — I shouldn't say unforgiving, sometimes that's used in a negative way — in a passionate market that holds you accountable, I think sometimes can be a little unforgiving. The media as well, including Gino and I, it can be even harder. Those teams, when expectations are placed on them and they deal with all of that, 99% of those teams absolutely crumble. The Eagles have won a championship instead, and have again made the playoffs in 4 or 5 years, also won a division title in 2019, 2018, nearly get back to the NFC championship. It wasn't for a couple plays in New Orleans in the divisional round. Leadership, guys like Malcolm Jenkins, Brandon Graham, Jason Kelsey, Rodney McLeod, Zach Ertz, Jason Peters. I'm going to say Carson Wentz, as much as you guys are going to hate that. Nick Foles, Darren Sproles. So many of those veterans were able to keep that team together. And without that, that team doesn't do nearly what they've accomplished in the last 5 seasons. And I think it's been so instrumental. And I think a lot of those guys are still instrumental leaders on this football team. Brandon Graham's still a huge voice in that locker room. So too is Jason Kelsey. Same with Fletcher Cox. You know what I mean? There's still a bunch of veteran leaders on this football team. Lane Johnson as well. Can't forget about Lane. And, I think the list goes on and on. But it's also huge when you can have young players, star players, main core pieces that are going to be with this football team for years to come. It helps even more when those guys are the leaders of this football team. And hearing today at practice, just like examples, DeVonta Smith, he missed practice today with a groin injury, but you heard him taking Britton Covey, the Eagles' rookie receiver, undrafted from Utah. He took him to the side. Smith took Covey to the side and kind of showed him the ropes and was coaching him up after a couple of drills, showing some things about leverage and route running. And you see the way these young players carry themselves, the way they lead vocally and by example. Jalen Hurts, I think the one thing we don't question about Jalen is his leadership. I think that's the ultimate strength of Jalen that makes a locker room want to fight for this guy, that makes them want him to be their quarterback, right? DeVonta Smith, as I said, A.J. Brown. You feel like Nakobe Dean's going to be that kind of guy too for the defense, the voice of the defense. Jordan Davis, just the way they carry themselves, the way, their process is set up, how disciplined they are in their approach. You would think that they are 10 plus year veterans. And it's super impressive. And I think that's going to be so important for the Eagles to overcome adversity again this year and throughout the future to show the next young era the ropes. I think these guys have had a great benefit of seeing the older generation of players on this roster and how they've been able to overcome. And they've also learned themselves through college, through their football careers. And I think it combines to make an extremely mature football team. And that's huge, especially for an Eagles team right now that has very lofty expectations in 2022. A lot of people think this Eagles team can be a Super Bowl contender. That could get to the heads of a lot of people. We saw that with the Eagles in 2011, 2015. I would say after the Super Bowl in 2018 and 2019 as well. It could get to the heads of a lot of young players especially. But if there was one team that I would say would break this streak of preseason favorite Eagles football teams that become disasters and some of the biggest disappointments of the NFL season that year, I think this team has that maturity to not care about what the outside noise is saying. This team truly does practice what they preach. I think there's a lot of coaches and players that say in their press conference, we can't get ahead of ourselves. We're taking things day by day. I truly believe that goes to the core of Jalen Hurts, DeVonta Smith, A.J. Brown, Dallas Goedert, Nakobe Dean, Jordan Davis, Cam Jurgens. I think this is a very disciplined football team, and I think that's going to go a long way this season. Just look at other examples. Like I loved when Jordan Davis was talking about staying after practice and learning from, not Javon Hargrave or Fletcher Cox, but, not just a veteran at his own position, but a veteran center in Jason Kelce, who's one of the best centers to ever do it. I think he's going to be a Hall of Famer when it's all said and done. Jordan Davis, who's going to go up against a lot of centers this year and throughout his career, wanted to learn from one of the best on the other side. How do I attack you? You know what I mean? What do you look for? Get behind enemy lines. That's so mature. Cam Jurgens did the same thing working with Jason Kelce after practice. And you see all the young cornerbacks staying after to work out with Darius Slay. Slay taking these guys through the ropes like Zach McPherson and Tay Gawan Jr. and Kerry Vincent. It's a very mature team. And it's not only the veterans that are still a voice in that locker room, but it's the young guys too. Maybe a lot of it is that these guys played at, NFL like college powerhouses that carry themselves like an NFL club. Alabama, right, for Hurts and Smith, and, Landon Dickerson as well. And, Georgia, like Nakobe Dean and Jordan Davis. I think that's certainly true that they've come out knowing how to go about this process more than maybe others would coming out of college. But I think at the same time, that's not giving these guys enough credit. I think those schools, Alabama, Georgia, LSU, the list goes on and on, Ole Miss for A.J. Brown. I think those schools probably love these guys because they already had that strength in them. I think it's going to be extremely important for the Eagles in 2022 to make sure they do meet those expectations. And I think they're going to. I'm not saying they're going to be a Super Bowl contender because, again, a lot of that rides on you got to have more than just leadership and maturity. You got to have talent. You got to have Jalen Hurts take another step passing-wise as a quarterback. But this is an extremely strong trait that this football team has from top to bottom, regardless of age. Coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles, I want to get back into the X's and O's. I want to talk about some personnel packages I think the Eagles should dial up more in 2022. That's coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles. And guys, today's podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. What BetterHelp does really hits home with me. Life has thrown us all curveballs, a lot of them. And a few years ago, for me personally, it seemed like every month it threw a different one at me. And I've always struggled with anxiety, and my mental health at that time it really just spiraled out of control because of some other stuff going on in my personal life outside of just the pandemic. Luckily, I finally had the courage to talk to somebody, and thank God I did. It's so important to show up for yourself and take care of yourself, but you got to let others help you get to that point as well. That's where BetterHelp comes in. BetterHelp Online Therapy will assess your needs and can match you with your own licensed professional therapist in less than 48 hours. I've been seeing a therapist now for, I believe it's 2.5 years, and it really has changed the way I think, the way I go about crisis and stressful situations. It's made me more of a patient person with myself and with others, friends and family, and strangers, colleagues. It's helped me know my emotions are just passing through me and they're not going to control me. I'll never recommend something to my listeners more than BetterHelp. It's not a crisis line. It's not self-help. It's professional therapy done securely online, available to people worldwide. You can log into your account anytime and send a message to your therapist. You can schedule weekly video or phone sessions if you're not comfortable doing it face to face. With therapy, it can take a few tries to find the right fit for you, therapist wise. BetterHelp makes it easy and free to change therapists if needed. I took 3 different counselors, I think, to talk to before I found the right one for me. BetterHelp is a great way to invest in yourself. Visit their website and read the testimonials that are posted daily. In fact, so many people have been using BetterHelp that they're recruiting additional therapists in all 50 states. And they have a special offer for my listeners. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's 10% off your first month of online therapy at betterhelp.com/lockedon. All right, Eagles fans, welcome back into this Thursday edition of your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast, Locked On Eagles. We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Well, I want to get into now some more X's and O's. We talked a lot about leadership and maturity that this Eagles team has heading into the 2022 season. I want to talk now about some packages the Eagles should dial up more on the offensive side of the football to find success. We talked the other day about the career trajectory of Dallas Goedert compared to Zach Ertz. And one thing we talked about why Zach Ertz's numbers looked better than Goddard's the first 4 years is that Goedert had to sit behind Zach Ertz for 4 years, an elite top tier tight end, whereas Zach Ertz, he was the top target. The receiver sucked for the majority of his time in Philadelphia in that first contract. And Brent Selleck by that point had already become a blocking tight end. And that got me thinking more about like how lucky the Eagles have been at tight end, going from Brent Selleck to Zach Ertz to Dallas Goedert, and how you had Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert for 4 years together. That is an incredible luxury that most teams do not have. The Eagles do not have that this year. Zach Ertz was traded to the Arizona Cardinals last year, and their tight end group behind Goedert, it's very young, it's very inexperienced, and it's very unproven. Grant Calcaterra, the rookie 7th round pick, I like his upside, but right now he hasn't practiced in a week and a half because of an injury. Tyree Jackson coming off a torn ACL, switched positions from quarterback to tight end last year. J.J. Arcega-Whiteside switching over from receiver to tight end. You've got Richard Rodgers still. It feels like he's been on this team forever. Jack Stoll is a good blocking tight end, but in 12 personnel, it's hard to have him out there because teams aren't going to respect his ability to catch the football. So they might think run, run, run. You want to be more optional with 12 personnel. The Eagles really don't have the personnel right now to use that package as much as they have in the past. So I thought about that the other day, and I'm like, well, I mean, this team, the majority of the time anyway, it's not going to be a big deal because they're going to run 11 personnel. The majority of the time, you want A.J. Brown out there, DeVonta Smith, and Quez Watkins with just one tight end, with Dallas Goedert and one running back. If people don't know what 11 versus 12 versus 21 means, so really the numbers just mean how many running backs are out there versus how many tight ends. So 11 personnel means there's only one running back and one tight end. 12 personnel means there's only one running back and two tight ends. 21 means there's two running backs and one tight end. So the first number is for how many running backs are on the field, and the second number is for how many tight ends are out there. Since you're not going to run as much 12 this year, again, 11 is going to be out there a lot. I would love to see some empty sets, maybe 4 receiver sets, 2 out there, have Quez Watkins and Zach Pascal, or if Jalen Reagor's on the team, spread things out. That really does help a mobile quarterback like Jalen Hurts. The Buffalo Bills did that a lot to help Josh Allen get going early on in his career. But how about 21 personnel? This is a package that the Eagles really don't use much of. But I'll tell you what, back in 2019, they didn't struggle with tight ends. They had their 12 personnel package with Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz. But you know what they really didn't have was a competent 11 personnel package. They didn't have 3 competent receivers at the end of the year. So what did they do? Some 12 personnel was the heavy package, but Doug Peterson used to dial up 21. He used to have Jordan Howard and Miles Sanders out there. He'd have Miles Sanders and Boston Scott because those were their two, honestly, and it wasn't even close. They were their 2 most explosive playmakers in the open field by a landslide because your receivers were J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, Greg Ward, and Robert Davis, Deontay Burnett. The list of receivers was horrible. This year, 11 personnel package is strong, but your 12 isn't as good without Zach Ertz now. So maybe to try to get some mismatches going on the offensive side of the football to catch a defense off guard, maybe you run more packages with both Miles Sanders and Kenneth Gainwell out there, Miles Sanders or Boston Scott. All 3 guys are very versatile. They're very dangerous in the open field. They're all good receiving running backs. Get them matched up on linebackers if a defense goes to a base package. Because if an offense has 2 running backs out there, look, if you it's very beneficial for the offense because, one, if they stay in nickel, you can run it down their throats. I love that lead blocker play they used to do in 2019 where that second running back, they did it with Jordan Howard once in Buffalo, and it resulted in that 70-plus yard touchdown to Miles Sanders. I was at that game. Also against Dallas in the do or die game, they pulled Miles Sanders, had him be the lead, like fullback, if you will, for Boston Scott. You can try that kind of stuff if a team stays light and pass-centric on defense. You can run it down their throats with 21, or if they do put more linebackers out there, use Kenneth Gainwell in pre-snap motion, get him lined up against a linebacker. The way Gainwell can run routes, I mean, he played receiver a lot at Memphis. Get him going in pre-snap motion more, or Boston Scott. I really think that's a package that this team should consider. I think it would be super interesting, and it would keep this team multiple. Again, 11 personnel is going to dominate this team's, usage on offense. You're going to use some 12 still because Jack Stoll can block, and I would hope one of these young tight ends can contribute with Dallas Goedert as well. But I think 21 is a good way to utilize the strength of your personnel. And right now, the strength of this team, when it comes to the skill position players, it's not tight end, it's receiver, and it's running back with those 3. And who knows if you bring back Jordan Howard, again, he adds an extra element with that physical power that, again, if you want to use him as like a fullback or a lead back, you can use these running backs in different ways with this package. I think it would be super interesting if they did try that out this year, just to make sure your offense continues to be multiple and you can beat a defense in multiple ways. Guys, today's podcast is sponsored by Built Bar. Oh, the best tasting protein bar in all of the land. It is a protein bar, but honestly, it tastes just like a candy bar. If you haven't tried, by the way, Built Bar Puffs yet, you are depriving yourself of one of the greatest life joys. And guess what? And it's not an almond joy. It's way better than a candy bar like an almond joy. There's a new flavor too. Ready? It's delicious, indulgent cookie dough covered in chocolate. That's right. Built has done it again. Anytime they put cookie dough in their box of flavors, I buy them every time. Let me introduce you to your new favorite, cookie dough chunk puffs. They have a light and chewy texture, real cookie dough chunks, and of course, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. All of the joys of eating cookie dough without the hassle of making it, plus it's healthy for you. Cookie dough chunk puffs are only 160 calories, and they have a whopping 15 grams of protein in them. Run over to Built.com right now to snag a box for you and the family. It will be a perfect treat, or you can find a really good hiding place and just hoard them all for yourself like I do. Like all Built bars, the new cookie dough chunk puff is covered in 100% real chocolate. And again, they're healthy and tasty, all of the flavor, none of the guilt. Head over to Built.com today. Use the promo code LOCKED15. LOCKED15, and you're going to get 15% off your order. Once again, that's promo code LOCKED15 at Built.com to get 15% off your order of the most delicious tasting protein bar in all the land. It's Built Bar. All right, Eagles fans, welcome back into this Thursday edition of Locked On Eagles. I'm Louis DiBiase joining you on the show. We got one more podcast this week, 5 each and every week, Monday through Friday on all podcast platforms. Wrapping up the show today, I want to continue to talk about, I did this the other day with Josh Sweat. We've been kind of talking about players that are not, I shouldn't say going under the radar, that are underrated, but maybe they're just not in the headlines. They're overlooked right now because of new signings that we're excited to talk about, new draft picks like Jordan Davis, Nakobe Dean. We're talking a lot about, A.J. Brown, and Jalen Hurts, of course, dominates the headlines. Brandon Graham coming back, Hassan Riddick. There's a lot of new pieces. James Bradbury, Jaquaski Tart. So sometimes that does allow for other core pieces to kind of fade into the background. And there's one guy that I think you should expect to be really good this year, right? That we're not really talking a lot about this year, and it's Avonte Maddox. So Avonte Maddox, I'm very intrigued, and most people haven't talked about him a lot, although he's going at it. I wish I could watch that battle. I can't wait to watch it on Sunday between him and Quez Watkins in the slot. We talked the other day about how DeVonta Smith and A.J. Brown have been battling James Bradbury and Darius Slay, but apparently the most intense battle has been inside between Maddox and Watkins, just exchanging blows, which makes sense. They're both shifty, fast players at their position in the passing game. Avonte Maddox, I think because, again, you added James Bradbury, like he's the third cornerback we talk about, but without Maddox, without a slot guy in the NFL now, you need a good, competent slot cornerback, especially with how much pre-snap motion NFL offenses use and how a lot of top-tier receivers do most of their work on the inside, in the slot. Tight ends too, like in NFL defenses now, their base package is nickel. So these slot corners, Avonte Maddox is undersized, but he's got to cover top-tier receivers. He's got to cover big slots, shiftier slots, tight ends, running backs. It's very important. You got to support in the run game too, because if a team's going in 12 personnel and they're running the football and you stay in nickel, you have to be good in run support. He has a very important role in 2022. And I think he's going to be really good, right? You would imagine so. He's coming off a year where he was Pro Football Focus's 16th best ranked corner, not even just for a slot corner, but the entire NFL. He was probably him and Tremaine Johnson in Buffalo were the two best slot corners, and of course Marlon Humphrey too, but I count him as just a do-it-all star corner, right? That moves everywhere. Avonte Maddox was, if not the top slot corner, he was top tier, and PFF ranked him as the 16th best overall coverage graded corner in 2021. So you should expect him to be just as good this year, right? However, Maddox, now you look at his career trajectory, he was amazing down the stretch his rookie year in 2018 on the outside. 2019, and he played safety that year too, by the way, very versatile. Maddox has played all three spots in the secondary, all four, I should say. He also, in 2019, really struggled when he moved back into the slot. He really was going back and forth the slot and outside. And, no corner that year really, it was like musical chairs. And he wasn't very good. He dealt with injuries too. He was definitely a disappointment from the 2018 rookie year where PFF was in love with this kid. And then 2020, he was really bad again. Jim Schwartz and Howie Roseman cut Rasul Douglas and Sidney Jones, and they moved Jalen Mills to safety. They traded for Darius Slay. They said, our CB2 on the outside, Cravon LeBlanc's going to be in the slot. No, actually, it was Nickel Roby-Coleman. We're going to move Maddox to the outside and hope that we can get back the 2018 version of Maddox that was very good at that spot. Maddox was very bad in 2020 on the outside. 2021, they put him back in the slot, and he has the best season of his career. So I think his best home, although I'm interested to see what he could do at safety still. They're not going to do that this year unless there's a ton of injuries. But I think Avonte Maddox's home is in the slot. And I think now, although he was bad for 2 years in a row in 2019 and 2020, I think of the 4 seasons, the 2 good years in 2018 and 2021, those are the real versions of Avonte Maddox, if you ask me. And I think he's being slept on a little bit for his importance and how good he could be this year, just because, that's just the natural life cycle in the NFL, where, when there's new draft picks, exciting free agent signings and tradees, and the offense always dominates the conversation more too. And when you're a slot corner, you don't get the love as much as a star boundary corner like Darius Slay. So a lot of those reasons, Maddox, kind of like Josh Sweat too, is going a little under the radar right now in Philadelphia, but I think he is a key piece to the success of this unit becoming a top 10 unit in 2022. And he's been battling with Quez Watkins, one of the best battles so far of training camp. All right, Eagles fans, that's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On Eagles. Thanks so much for tuning into the show. Make sure you subscribe on all podcast platforms, posted every day, Monday through Friday, in video form as well on YouTube. And make sure you hit us up on Twitter at Locked On Birds and at DBLCLOE. We thank you for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Make sure your second listen is the Locked On NFL podcast. All the news across the league in under 30 minutes. It's free and available wherever you get to the shows. As always, thank you for downloading. Thank you for watching and listening, and let's go Birds.